Great. And we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today I have a little something different for everybody. I have on the line Jesse HOUWING. Jesse, you're a trainer, coach, and tinkerer, meaning you like to experiment with a lot of things. You're based in the Netherlands. And I met you at the nlscrum Meetup in person, and we got to talking about pairing and mobbing. And so we're going to dive into that today. So welcome. And I want to ask the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question because I don't really have a fixed place and I drag a lot of stuff with me. So I've got a bag with my laptop and a separate keyboard and my favorite mouse, and my back usually kills me, so I've got a laptop stand which helps, and then I prefer to sit and stand once in a while. So a client that I recently worked with, I actually took their desk and I shoved 12 of those big 500-page stacks of paper under the feet to transform my desk into a standing desk. It wasn't a sit-stand desk, so sitting and standing meant relocating to a different desk. But yeah. So the trunk of my car is full with all kinds of stuff.
All right. And why are you moving around so much? What does your work setup look like?
Yeah, so I coach and I train people. So when I'm delivering a class, I do it either in our own office or at a client's office. When I coach people, it just really helps to just see people. You want to observe people kind of in their natural habitat. And well,
funny that you're saying that with the background. Those of you who are not seeing what we're seeing right now, go to the YouTube or go to the notes page on the show, and you'll see the big gorilla behind Jesse. So for those of you listening,
yep. So yeah, it's just it's kind of different to put a camera into somebody's office and being able to constantly observe them from a remote place. That just doesn't really feel right. So when I'm coaching or helping clients on site, then that's usually where I am. So I just usually take all my stuff with me. I've got a lease car, and the trunk is just full of everything. Whenever we go and do something in the weekend, I just have to unload the whole car and then get the weekend stuff into it. That's kind of how I roll.
Okay. And then you also mentioned that you're sort of remote by invitation. So you work with a number of different clients, and then they can get a hold of you wherever you are, but you like to coach in person is what I understand.
Right. Yeah. And usually when they have a problem is when I'm not there. So then I can either get into the car and help them, or can you join me? And then we'll do a screen share session, or in some other way, we'll just try to get into contact. Yeah.
Okay. So I know you because of the nlscrum Meetup, like I mentioned. And I know you do a lot of agile coaching and scrum training. And not everybody from this audience really knows what agile and scrum is, but they've listened probably to enough podcasts to know the basics of that. Now, you and I got into a conversation at this meetup talking about pairing and mobbing, because I had written about it in my book that some people find it more comfortable to pair together remotely rather than actually together. And so, and somebody tweeted back at me that they were completely surprised by this statement. And I thought, okay, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And I thought, I'm going to ask somebody about it. And I asked you. And it turns out I'm not necessarily on crack. But let's step back a bit.
Right.
I'm a little bit on crack. It depends on the situation. But let's step back a bit. And first, can you just tell us more about what pairing and mobbing is exactly?
Sure. So let's start with pairing, which is basically this simpler form of mobbing. And with pairing, it's just two people working together behind the same computer on a single task at the same time. And there's different setups for pairing. What's called a strong style pairing, or kind of more loose. And the strong style pairing kind of says that the person that has the keyboard is executing the actions, is doing the work, but the person that not has the keyboard is telling the other person what to do, what they expect, how they would like to have it done. And in that setup, it's kind of the person doing the talking can't actually do the action. So you have to explain the other person well enough what it is that you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and have a conversation around it. And that kind of really helps to make sure that you're just not doing it by yourself. A lot of people experience pairing with a very well experienced person, and then it's just looking along over their shoulder to see them do great stuff, and that's basically what you're trying to prevent. So in that setup, it kind of, because you have the conversation and the other person really understands what's going on, you make sure that the thing that you're trying to do is well understood. And then
Okay.
when you upgrade that to mobbing, it's basically the same, but then you have multiple people telling one person what to do.
Oh, that sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. So usually there's kind of a role separation between the group. So you have the person doing the work, who's called the driver, and then you've got the other people that are called the mob. And usually there's a navigator, just like in a rally race. It's saying go left, go right, turn, or there's a hill coming up and there's a big hole right behind it, and kind of guiding the driver along. And then the rest of the mob is looking around, trying to figure out where the competitors are, and is kind of looking at different opportunities for the navigator to go into. And then you could do more programming, which is then just coding, but you could also do mob testing or pair testing, or you could, after the developer is ready, they can pair up with the tester and then show, this is what I did, this is how it's working, and then test it together. And as they then find issues, they can solve them on the spot and just continue right after.
Okay. So, why is this better than somebody sitting alone and coding? Why is it better to have somebody driving?
Well, normally in many teams, you see that there's this process was called a code review. So somebody just worked on their own, and then they finished something and it's working really well, and then they ask for a review just to make sure that they didn't do anything stupid. And what you do then is that you ask a review of the end result. And
Yeah.
if you're working with somebody to create it, and that person is constantly giving you feedback on what you're doing, then you're not just critiquing the end result, but the process of how you got there. You're figuring out better ways. You're asking about alternatives. So you have a conversation about the process towards what you're trying to achieve, instead of that you're critiquing the thing that you're being presented with. So you're going to optimize your opportunities for feedback. And by optimizing your opportunities for feedback, hopefully you'll get a better end result, and with the benefit that the other person knows exactly what you did. So if there's a production issue or anything else, then the person next to you is just as likely to be able to support that problem as you are. So it can also remove that that strong dependency of, oh, that's John's code, so if there's an issue we must call John, because John worked with Pete, and Pete worked with Katrina, and kind of they've been sharing that knowledge. And when you then step up to mobbing, it's not just two people working on it, but it's the whole team working on that one topic at the same time. So everybody contributed, everybody was present, everybody knows what's going on. So usually when there's an issue, anybody on the team can actually help out to resolve that.
Sounds like a great benefit. And we were talking before the interview started about how this doesn't apply just to the programming world, that it is also, it has a wider application. And I had given you the example that my friend Gretchen and I wrote a book together using Google Docs. And I'd be when we were in the writing phase, I would be the one like talking off the top of my head because I had the knowledge. And she was then taking the information and just typing it into a Google Doc. And then later, she and I would both go through the text and add formatting and add stuff together at the same time, which was a great thing in Google Docs. So it's not just relegated to the programming world, but it does have broader applications. And of course you can mob or pair on lots of things, especially if you're using an online tool.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how much faster you could iterate on things. A couple of months ago, we traveled towards the other side of the country, and our country is small. You know it because you live here as well.
You can bike across, yeah.
Biking across still takes you a whole day, but
it does.
But we were going to the birthday party of my grandfather, and we wanted to create a song for that. And normally that's something that process starts weeks in advance, but this time it didn't. So in the car on our way there, we contacted all the other nieces and nephews, like, ooh, but we wanted to do a song and we forgot about it. and we kind of co-wrote the song. We chose the melody, and then we co-wrote the song in the car, with kind of everybody on the in the passenger seat, live editing. And then the thing is, you don't have to make any agreements on which part is being done by whom, and what it has to rhyme with what. And everybody was doing live edits. So you could see those 8 little cursors kind of going around the screen all at the same time. And within the hour, we had everything done. And normally this is a process that takes weeks.
Amazing.
So it was really efficient. It was really cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, a great use case too. That is also not to do with programming or development. So normally people do this though side by side. If you're pairing, you're usually sitting. There's one computer, like you said, and somebody is driving, and the other person is directing. And then with mobbing, you actually have multiple people. Usually they're sharing like a big screen. Maybe paint us a picture for what mobbing looks like in the same room, and then let's talk about remote and the benefits and challenges of this remote.
Right. So what we normally see is like 250 or 80-inch screens, a very powerful computer, multiple keyboards on the desk, because some people want to have an ergonomic keyboards and other people have crazy keyboard shortcuts. So usually people might have their own keyboards on the desk, and a number of seats for people to sit behind. Maybe also a few laptops. So when there's kind of a research question, you want to look something up, then somebody can do that kind of while the rest is continuing onwards. And that's basically the team setup. Have a whiteboard next to it, piece of paper on the table, a couple of whiteboard markers present. So it's really a very collaborative space. And think about it. If normally you would have a team with 8 people, you would have 8 very expensive laptops, because all of them have to be able to run the code and work on it and that kind of stuff. Now, if you give all of those people a very lightweight laptop, because it's only used for research, and you pull all of that money into a very, very powerful workstation, then the editing experience on those 2 very, very big screens is the kind of the most fluent and efficient editing experience that you can think of. So it's kind of, there's some interesting benefits towards that as well.
Right.
That's kind of what that setup looks like. If you really want to see it, there's a movie by Woody Zuhl, who's one of the kind of the leading people in this space, that shows a couple of those kind of setups and what it looks like, and what a day in a mob would look like. So if you were looking for inspiration, and that's really something, suppose that we can include it in the show notes.
Oh, for sure. And all the links that you sent to me on LinkedIn, I still have those, and I'll be including those in the show notes too. They were very, very useful in terms of just wrapping your head around this. Okay, so now we kind of have a visual of what it looks like in person, which sounds awesome. It sounds like a great collaborative experience. I can also envision like bowls of chips and maybe some snacks and, things like that. Maybe, I don't know. I would have snacks.
Yep. Coffee machine.
Yeah, coffee for sure. Yeah, for sure. But now, taking it remotely, what does that look like if you're doing pairing or mobbing?
Yeah, so basically sort of the same, but it's now multiple people sharing the same editor experience. So you're all looking at the same document at the same time. You want to be able to hear each other at the same time. You probably want to be able to see each other at the same time, because you might see that somebody is frowning and then ask, so what's your opinion about that? Or is there anything that I should be worried about? So basically, you want to have all of that open. You want to have a shared desktop with the editor. You want to have a video screen on, and you want to have a good audio connection. And then basically, it's just somebody sitting behind their computer, one person talking and the other person typing. And in a mob situation, it would just be the same, but just with more screens.
Okay. So to me, it sounds like there's some real benefit, like there can be a comfort benefit to the remote aspect. I mean, you're in your own home or wherever you might be. Let's assume you're in your own home. You've got your own chair, you've got a quiet environment, you've got your cat or a dog or, whatever it is. So it sounds like, why would you, what are the benefits of doing it remotely over in person?
Well, the benefits that you mentioned kind of are kind of already in there, and then in my case, it would be I get a call from the client. Can you jump on this call and help us out? If I'd say, Sure, I'll be there in an hour. That's 1 hour driving lost, and then it takes me another hour to get back, or it's 2 minutes to actually get me into that setup. So there's kind of a lot of time savings there as well.
Oh,
Um,
indeed.
you could work around. You could beat traffic and work around that a little bit, and you get some crazy things with people have very peculiar setups. Like I've got a crazy keyboard with weird keyboard bindings, and this is just how I work. And then you don't have to drag that along just about everywhere because that's just the stuff that you have there. And you've got some pretty peculiar programmers out there.
Indeed.
We are in the business of automating things. So if you can save keystrokes by completely automating your keyboard, then there are people who actually do that.
Oh yeah, I can imagine the efficiency actually. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah, that's the way your brains are wired. And I wish I had more of that myself. If you saw the way I did some of my things, people, I've made a lot of people laugh. I've used a lot of people. So then why are there, there's kind of a group that are opposed to doing this remotely. And I got a bit of kickback on Twitter from some folks after reading my book saying like, I don't understand, like, why would you want to do this remotely? And to me, it just seemed like, why wouldn't you do it remotely? I mean, you could get whoever, programmers from all over the world. You're in the comfort of your own, wherever you are. It seems like a no-brainer to do it remotely. So why wouldn't you do it? What are the challenges, or why are people kicking back?
Well, I I think if you go back a little bit, and not everybody around the world has the same kind of stable internet connection that we have. In the Netherlands, most people nowadays that can afford it have fiber optics into their home. So broad bandwidth no longer really an issue, but in a lot of places, of course, it is. Now, if you're sharing this 4K screen resolution of preferably multiple screens, and the video link and want to have good audio, then that actually becomes quite a difficult setup to kind of maintain. You want to have good audio quality, so you'd have either a headset on your head all the time, or you want to have a silent room that you can sit in, because you have a microphone open. So it kind of puts some constraints on your setup. But with the development of tooling and with the bandwidth advantages that we have nowadays, a lot of those kind of problems are kind of slowly dissolving.
Yeah, depending on the country and where you're working. Like Germany has a surprisingly bad internet, depending on where you are in Germany. I'm always surprised. I would think that they would get it right, but yeah. So it's not just the countries that most people associate with it. I hear India a lot. It depends on of course where you are in India, but the bandwidth in Argentina. I hear some things about Argentina where so it just depends
Yeah.
on where you're working from.
And then when you think about it, when people are working remotely or are outsourcing work, then it's very often to countries with where the cost is lower. But that also puts kind of some of the constraints on these kind of things. So maybe the machines are less powerful. The bandwidth is maybe the bandwidth is good, but the connection is flaky. And then if you're battling that all day, then it becomes a very, very unproductive experience. And I can totally imagine that you want to sit together.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it sounds super frustrating. So it sounds like really if you want to do pairing or mobbing, then infrastructure, having a great infrastructure setup is going to be key. You want to have excellent audio, so a silent background or a great microphone. And how important would you say is the video link when you're pairing and mobbing?
Well, you want to see the other person because you want to know when to speak and when not to speak. So the problem with not seeing the other person is that you don't know whether or not you're interrupting their train of thought, or whether or not they're still typing, or maybe they're pausing to think about something. And that's not something that you can see from a blinking cursor. And that's usually also not something that you can hear. So you probably have to work on some of the etiquette of how you want to work together, and that the other person will speak out that, hold on, I need to think about this for a while, and then just, all right, continue. And you kind of have this little bit of that's not something people are used to, so probably they're gonna have to learn that. But there's also some real advantages in new tooling that's coming about right now, where instead of sharing your whole screen, you're just sharing the state of your editor across. So Visual Studio Live shares a feature right now that kind of puts Google Doc right into the code editor. And you can have 6 of those same different color cursors going through different files at the same time. You can see which errors are popping up, which tests are failing, and you can work together collaboratively in the same code base, live, kind of on one person's laptop. or on that very, very expensive workstation that's sitting in the corner of your mobbing room. Yeah. And then suddenly a lot of the bandwidth problems kind of go away. If you don't have to share two 4K screens, then you save a lot of bandwidth for audio.
Yeah, indeed, quite a lot. And I also saw on some of the links that you sent, there are people that they would have a separate device for the video. So they'd use a small iPad for the video connection, for example, and then use have your other real estate on the other external monitors for the code base or whatever it is that you're working on. So that also seems like a good setup.
Yeah, and the advantage is that then you can, if you connect your iPad to the guest network, or you use its LTE connection to connect to your mobile provider, then it doesn't share the same bandwidth link, and they won't be competing for the same network bandwidth, and that kind of saves you a little bit as well. But just taking away all of the screen sharing bandwidth is probably the best idea.
Right, right.
Yeah, and there's some other benefits there as well, is that since you're in your own editor and you're seeing the state, you get your key bindings, you get your own extensions, you get your own setup, and the other person doesn't have to know that you have a different setup. It doesn't even have to know that you're on a Mac or that you're working on Linux or that you're working on Windows, because it kind of shares all across. So that's there's actually some really interesting benefits on there as well. Everybody can work on the setup that they want, yet still collaborate in the same document.
Okay. And what is your personal preference? If you were going to do pairing or mobbing, do you prefer it in person, or is remote also fine?
I would probably want to start in person, especially usually when I would start, it's with somebody that I don't really know yet. So you want to get to know somebody really quickly. Though if you're both really committed and the remote experience adds a little bit of frustration and you have the room to express that, then you probably learn each other. You get to know each other even quicker than sitting together. It's really interesting how to think about how Woody Zool phrases this, is that you are not really a team if you what is it? If you don't know what the other person's sweat smells like, something along those lines. It's like if you're really, really working together on the same thing and you're really, really working on kind of cracking that difficult nut, then you probably know what the other person's sweat smells like. And if once you're in that mode, I don't think it really matters if you're remote or if you're local or anything. But it's much easier to kind of get to that level if you're all in the same room and you're able to lock that, and then nobody leaves until we solve this problem.
Right. And also going through something difficult together or solving a difficult challenge together really brings out the best and the worst in people.
Oh,
you
yeah.
see, when people blow, and you see when, and maybe sometimes there's some benefits to being remote. You just shut the laptop and then go take a walk and blow some steam.
Just the screen just went blank. What just happened there?
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. So are you seeing then more and more, in terms of your experience at the offices that you coach at and that you work at, are you seeing more of a trend towards people doing remote, or is it still people really prefer in the office? Just in your personal experience, I would say.
Yeah, it kind of comes from two angles. Most of the teams that I see want to work together, and they want to have a team room. They don't want to have an open office. They want to have their own collaborative space. They want to have large whiteboards that don't have to be wiped out at the end of the day because security says so. They want to be able to leave some of their documents around because that's the way that it makes sense to be in that place, in that order, and that's kind of their physical space. And at the same time, those people are working with people remotely in different countries or from different vendors, and they want to have that experience as optimal as possible. So even though you see teams that are trying to work as best as possible in their own location, it still doesn't mean that they're not also working with people remotely and want to also optimize for that experience. So that's usually what I see. I see very few people in this country where the whole team is working remotely and everybody's kind of collaborating on their problem from wherever they are. But I think it's also because the country is relatively small.
Right.
So here, it's just because from where I live, within an hour, I'm either at the south border, the north border, the eastern border, or the western border of our country. So and then depending on traffic, of course. So for a lot of people, it's not like the American consultant who has to fly in on Monday and then leaves on Friday and doesn't have to see their family kind of all week. It's a different kind of experience over here. So I don't know how it is for other people around the world.
Yeah, indeed. It's the Netherlands has an interesting that it's an interesting constraint, or not a constraint, the opposite of constraint, really, in that it's a small country and it's relatively easy to get anywhere. So if you were going to meet a client, face-to-face time is usually preferable. Because the drive really isn't so long. Also, depending on the weather. Today we're having like super cold weather, and there's lots of traffic.
Oh yeah.
Reports of traffic accidents out there because of the ice on the road. So,
but it probably takes less time to just get there and have a talk in person than get Skype to work. So,
you know how much I love Skype. Anybody listening to this podcast will know there's no love for Skype. So, yeah, indeed, if you're using Skype, you're shooting yourself in the foot there. So we're coming to the end of the time. Man, that went fast. I had so many questions, but I would like to just give an opportunity. Is there anything else that you'd want to add to about pairing or mobbing or?
Yeah. The interesting thing is that a lot of my clients, they say people should pair more, but I think it's more. I'd hope that people want to pair more. Because pairing is a very learning opportunity. It's a very big learning opportunity. You're working with somebody to improve how you do things and not just the end result of what you did. You're learning from each other. From, oh, I know a keyboard shortcut for that. Or you could, instead of using this tool, why not use that tool? And oh, there's a command line that you could actually use for this. And have you ever used this website? And but I see a possible security thing here, and if you do it that way, then it would be different. And all of those kind of things can be shared across your team on the spot immediately, and then kind of everybody learns from that. And many teams are kind of postponing that until code review, and then when they get under pressure, they skip that. So for teams that want to improve how they work together, can have a standardized experience. This is how we do things. Optimize the way they do things. These kind of experiences of working together in pairs, and especially when you're working in a mob, you'll very, very quickly figure out kind of everything that you disagree on that nobody ever said. So in the training experience, that's what I see a lot when we just put people in. You have to deliver something in an hour and a half as a mob. And then this is the goal, go do. And then usually within half an hour, everybody is in conflict with everybody else.
Oh, interesting. So that's a standard scenario when you're doing trainings on mobbing.
It's something that in our Scrum training, sometimes if the team really has trouble collaborating, I kind of force them to. And then usually the couple of times that we tried, the first thing that they say is, we hated this. and then we dive in a little bit deeper on, so what do you hate about it? And it's she did something that was totally what I would not do, and then I told her, and then she ignored me. It's like, all right, so that's interesting. So how many times does that happen in your real life? Well, I don't know, because we don't really talk about these kind of things, right? So, oh, that's interesting. So, and then, yeah, I want to use tabs, and the other person wants to use spaces, which is kind of in the programming world, kind of this, what kind of white space do you use is something that very often comes up. So coding standards, how many white lines, how do you lay out your comments? How big are your functions? What's your naming standards? All those kind of things. If teams don't really have a standard about it, and everybody's working alone, then they don't really need to have a standard about it. But if you're switching who's behind the keyboard every 10 minutes, then you better have a standard. And if you don't have one, then this is a very nice opportunity to find one. Yeah. So it's a really interesting way of very, very quickly learning new things together as a team, and trying to figure out kind of where differences in experience and knowledge and other things are. So most teams that really adopt this, they adopt this from the perspective of, we want to learn together. And because they want to learn together, they want to work together as often as possible. And mobbing is a very natural way of doing that. So instead of forcing people to work together to improve the quality of the code, for example, teams that want to learn a lot from each other kind of naturally gravitate towards these kind of working styles.
Brilliant. And I really hope that the audience listening to this can also extrapolate out from that doesn't need to be programming. It can be anything. It can be Google Doc. It can be a spreadsheet. It can be, yeah. So even if you're not a programmer, I can see the wide applicability of this. And I often encourage people to, I mean, when we're working remotely, often people are working on their own and then we get together in some sort of meeting to discuss. But actually we can easily collaborate online together and work together on projects. And that's something that I'm hoping to see more and more and more of. For instance, I run a virtual co-working space where everybody's just hanging out in their own separate rooms, and every once in a while we get together in the coffee corner and hang out. But we could easily be sitting together working on our own projects and asking for advice or talking through things. I mean, that would be, it would be a great thing. So indeed, your argument for why to do this at all is very powerful. So
thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, awesome. I hope people are inspired by this.
But it's usually a hard step for people because not a lot of people are accustomed to being critiqued about how they do things every second of their day. So you really have to be open for continuous improvement.
Right. So maybe first go take a training from Jesse so that you can work out all the kinks together with a facilitator, and then maybe back so that you don't end up virtually punching each other out.
Yeah. Or start experiencing this like an hour in the morning and then just do your thing as you normally do, and then figure out if this is something that you like, and if you like, just do more of it, and then maybe you'll end up working together all day instead of just the first hour of the day. Yeah.
Right. So small steps and iterate. I think I've heard that somewhere before.
Something with agile.
Something with agile. Exactly. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's been totally awesome, your tips.
Wonderful.
So I really appreciate it. And until next time, everybody, be powerful.